Our next speaker will talk about adaptation to the modern technology and succeeding in this new era. Let us welcome Andres Freire, serial entrepreneur and former Minister of Innovation from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Andres?
Thank you.
Good to see you.
I appreciate your effort to roll the R's. He asked me 5 times, is it Freire? Freire? I said, just say Jackson or something like that. I always dreamt of having an artistic name, and maybe this was the time. Well, I'm from Buenos Aires. I'm from Argentina. I was the Minister of Innovation until roughly over a year ago. And I've been an entrepreneur all my life. So I was invited to share some thoughts with you around innovation. And I'm going to be providing maybe a very brief general framework that I think applies both to government, but also to any entrepreneur with their own business, and also to life in general. So I think we're facing amazing times in terms of the speed of change. And what I would like to offer is, again, as I was saying, a very small framework that then with Mike that will join me to the stage, we can apply to maybe having some specific conversations about my experience as leading innovation in Buenos Aires, but also in entrepreneurship in general, and I hope you can take it with you. So the first thing I'd like to ask, and this is more like a general question, is how dynamic do you think society is? If you were to define the speed at which things change in society or in the world, how would you define how dynamic it is? I mean, raise your hand. Who would say it's super dynamic? I don't know. Whoever resonates with the word super, I don't know. Some that, extremely dynamic. Okay, sounds more appealing than super or something like that. Well, there is a piece of research that a group called the Knowledge Doubling Curve Center conducted over history, where basically analyzed or tried to find a way to assess the speed at which a society changes. And the proxy they found was how much time does it take for the world to double the amount of information that is accessible to society. So if you have, let's go back to, I don't know, old times, like if you had 10 books, and then suddenly you have 20 books, then you double the amount of knowledge, okay? One might say, well, but that is information, not necessarily knowledge. But the approximation that these people worked with was this notion that they wanted to measure how quickly a society could double the knowledge. In 1900, the projection was that it would take 100 years for the world to double the knowledge that it had available. Now, in 1975, they said we missed the mark. It takes 25 years to double the knowledge. Okay. Now, in 1990, they said it takes 12 years. In the year 2000, they said roughly every 6 to 7 years we can double the knowledge that is accessible. And a year ago, they said it takes roughly a year to double the knowledge that is available in the world around whatever topic you look at on average. So the speed at which the world learns and develops content and information grows faster than our ability to imagine that change happening. IBM recently said that we are not far from a situation where whatever we study in the morning will be obsolete in the afternoon, but literally obsolete. So imagine people that go to a university to study for 4 years or whatever. I mean, so literally what they learn in the first year, by the 4th year, will be absolutely irrelevant. Well, the same applies to knowledge in general. And that is the result of exponential speed of change that is currently happening as a result of these disruptors. These disruptors were defined by the World Economic Forum, and I like it a lot. I'm quite involved with the World Economic Forum. I'm a young global leader of the WEF, and Basically, what they're saying is technology is becoming part of every single thing we do. So it's no longer you're a technology company. It's like whatever company you have will have technology embedded in it. We are facing an environment of abundance of data. So the issue is no longer whether we have enough data, but whether we can discriminate from the data which one is relevant. There's a huge issue of diversity and generational change. The chip with which the millennials and the people that are becoming the children of the millennials are come with is completely different. Artificial intelligence is basically changing everything. I was meeting with one of the key guys at SoftBank that recently announced a $5 billion fund for Latin America, and basically what he was saying is anything that has to do with artificial intelligence we want to invest in, simply because it's going to redefine any industry. I don't care which industry you're in, you have artificial intelligence and that's where you're betting your energy. Well, that's something that we should look at. Jobs vulnerable and subject to automation. The World Bank recently conducted a research that basically said that roughly half of the jobs will be automated. In the case of Argentina, it will be roughly 63% of the jobs will be replaced by robots at some point in time. So that generates amazing challenges for the future. Explosion in contingent work. I mean, just technology, it's also allowing for people to work distantly, and changes in the nature of a career. I remember my dad saying the best thing you can do is go to a university, then you get into a job, stay there for 30 years, and then your children will join the same company, and you will build a name, and people say the Freires are great employees of this organization. I mean, that is gone. I mean, I don't know, people say, I'm going to work for 2 years, make some money, then take a trip, go around the world, enjoy life. And then the question is, what are you going to do next? Well, I don't know yet. It doesn't matter. I figure it out by the time I get there. So that is how the nature of life has changed. Now, the question, and I think the deep question is, this sounds like cognitively interesting, but this is affecting our future. Half of you will lose your job because a robot will do your job better than you do it, okay? And your children will be faced with the challenge of what do I study, what do I do? So the key question is, how do we respond as human beings to this challenge? And my view is there's 3 ways to react to this. The first one is denial, okay? So this is not happening. This is crappy theory that I think will simply not affect my life. It might affect other people's lives, but not mine, okay? The second reaction is trying to stop it, okay? So, I don't know, Uber is, for example, growing in Argentina, and all the taxi drivers are actively trying to stop Uber from being, a solution. So they do riots and they do things, and people, the only thing they do is they give Uber more press, and people take more Uber in the morning as a result of the taxi drivers trying to stop Uber, okay? That's a reality. Now, the third option is what I call doing Aikido. I like Aikido. I haven't practiced it. I practice martial arts, but Aikido is the only martial art that doesn't have an attack. So instead of attacking, it basically uses the power of the opponent, and it yields directing the energy to the place where it wants to go. So in other words, it uses the energy of what's coming and directs it in the place that needs to be directed to. So doing Aikido to the future, in my view, is instead of trying to stop it or saying this is not going to happen, saying this will happen. Now the question is, how do we put it at the service of what we need to do? And conceptually, it sounds relatively easy. The difficulty is how do we apply it, and how do we make it happen in our jobs? Okay, this is going to happen. They're going to automate my work. So what do I do with this? How do I respond to this? I'm the Minister of Innovation. Okay, how do we change the fact that transportation will change so dramatically? How do we adapt to that? So those are the kind of questions that I think one needs to ask in our personal lives and in all domains to try to respond. And I think the key dimension to be able to start finding the answers is an issue of mindsets. So an issue of switching some kind of deep ingrained ways of looking at life that are prerequisites in order for those changes or those answers to start to emerge. The first one has to do with scarcity versus abundance. I mean, one of the key things for any disruption to take place is that you cannot have a penny pinching mentality. So you cannot be saying like, okay, we're going to do this tiny thing and see if it works. No. You need to reinvent. There's a paradigm in innovation, culture of innovation, which is break it even if it's not broken, okay? So it's not like, well, don't do anything. It's not broken yet. No. You need to break it in order to build it again. So, but you can only do that in a mindset of abundance. If you're managing scarcity as a concept in day-to-day life, so learning to think big, learning to disrupt what you're doing, and trying to start with a blank sheet of paper and saying, we're going to just redo it again. But why? We're relatively okay, but because relatively okay is not enough for this exponential times of change. The second one has to do with the way we treat knowledge. So instead of a stock of knowledge, which is what most of us learn to do. So we went to a university, we learned, and they gave us a diploma saying, you gathered this stock of knowledge, okay? Now knowledge is an issue of flow rather than stock. So how do we continuously learn? How do organizations learn to learn? How do you take calculated risks? How do you try doing things and explore doing things as a way to really gather information and learn again and again, because as we were saying, maybe what you learned a week ago is already obsolete. And the last one has to do with connecting with a purpose. Now, many organizations ask me, okay, I was helping a pharmaceutical company that invited me to give a talk like this one, and they said, well, we don't have the answers yet. We don't know whether to go this route or this other route. How do we solve it? And my answer was, you don't know yet. And trying to find the answer right now is going to be impossible. But the question is, how connected are your people to saving people's lives? How are connected people to the essence of the purpose that is behind what you're doing? If you have a deep connection to the sense of purpose, then people will be able to find the answers when the time comes. Now, if people are just trying to catch the new flavor of the month and trying to adapt without really knowing why they're doing what they're doing, then you will get lost in translation. So again, I wanted to present this framework. Now I'll invite Mike. Mike, where are you? Mike, are you here? Has Mike left?
Mike is back.
Oh, Mike, there you are. Okay. I'll let Mike introduce himself, but thank you. But I think that everything we're going to discuss now, I wanted to relate it to this, and hopefully you'll take some of this with you to apply it in whatever domains you're part of, okay? But again, ultimately, it's thinking big, it's learning how to learn and take calculated risks over and over again in everything you do, and then connecting people with a sense of purpose. The closest you are to these three dimensions, the closer you are to be able to respond to these times of change without having the answers, but being very close to finding those answers when they arise. So I'll pass it on to you. Shall we sit?
Great.
Thank you.
Sit.
Okay, good. Thanks.
So Andy, that was great. I'm lucky today because usually I'm on the other end getting some questions.
I can ask you questions if you like.
Darn it, man, this isn't going to work out. So I'm the Director of Innovation here at the City of Miami. And the first question that I'm asking you, because it's always the first one that gets asked of me, is how do you define innovation?
Well, I define innovation as erasing boundaries, and especially mental boundaries, of how something can be done differently. So it's sort of a discipline or a practice that basically has to do with saying there must be other ways in which this can be done or solved. It's a mindset.
Right.
Yes. So that's really, and it's beautiful because it applies to any domain in life, marriage, I mean, whatever. So
cuts across.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm fascinated because you've done so much incredible innovation work, both in the private sector and in the public sector and across organizations. And You mentioned in this concept of Aikido and martial arts, a lot of it is about momentum and how you rechannel and how you deal with momentum. There's in this work, I found that there's these two contradicting tracks. One is we've got to innovate now, we've got to innovate fast, we've got to be the future before we're even there. And then there is this work of doing the culture change that you talked about and how you prepare an entire organization to be able to operate at this pace. So can you talk a little bit about even whether or not that's a contradiction, your experience between the demands of change versus the hard work of culture change, which often takes quite a bit of time to do?
Well, let me share a story, which is sort of funny. When I was invited to become the Minister of Innovation, in my ministry, there were roughly like 4,000 employees, okay? So different undersecretaries. And we moved to a new building. And when I got to the building, it was a typical, the prior building was a typical old public office of multiple, small, tiny offices and all of that. So we moved to a new place, and they were like finishing the building, and I sat down with the person in charge of the building, and I started saying, show me the meeting rooms. And they said, well, this is the main meeting room. Okay, I don't want any chairs. I just want to put a ping pong table. And they said, no, that you do in entrepreneurship. Yeah. You don't do that in public service. And I said, well, I don't care, just put it. Let's just do it. I said, but I don't know whether we can do it legally. And I said, like, well, what does it mean? I mean, you just cannot put a ping pong table. I mean, is it against the law to put a... No, but we were supposed to put meeting rooms and desks. Yeah. And I was like, well, and these walls, tear them down. And this, so we created a beautiful open space. And this is a funny story, which is we had a huge wall. And I saw just a young lady in her early 20s that was drawing on a sheet of paper that was beautiful. She was really gorgeous in the way she was drawing in napkins. And I told her, if I give you this wall, what would you paint? And she said, me paint that wall? Yeah, I mean, tell me. I said, well, if you give me a week, I'll think about it. So she came back with a beautiful drawing of all the icons of the city of innovation of the city of Buenos Aires, and I told her, okay, this is the deal. You'll come on a Saturday, I'll let you in, you'll go and paint the wall with markers. She would do it with markers. Just paint the whole wall, and just sign it, put your name down there. And she said, but would they let me in? I said, of course they would let you in, no problem. I just...
Permission.
So she went there on a Saturday, and I got a phone call saying there's someone that wants to intrude your office. And I said, no, it's okay, she can come in. She came in, she made all the drawings, she spent like all the weekend there, and in the Monday morning I came to the office to see the beautiful drawing, and there was a lady there that introduced herself as a director of compliance and in building and facility management. And she told me, what you did goes against the law. That's affecting, it was like public assets, destroying public assets, okay? And I said, why? I said, well, because we were supposed to have all the floors look the same, and you're introducing a disruption with a ping pong table, with a wall. People are not liking the way you manage this. You're gonna have big trouble. In fact, you might go to jail because it's like affecting, I said like, so I called the mayor and I said, I called the governor and I said, listen, I mean, it's been only a week and they're telling me I'm gonna go to jail. I wanna know whether that might happen. And he said, no, I fully support you. Now, the end of the story, which is interesting, is all the floors of the other ministers reacted the same. So the transportation minister started saying, hey, hold on a second, just tear down all the things, tear down this wall, let's make it look like a transportation hub. So everyone started doing the same. And in my view, of course I started having people saying, oh, they're competing against us. I said, no, we want everyone to do the same. That's a spirit, which is, so I illustrate that because that was, to me, the best example of trying to instill a culture change.
I'm curious, was it actual regulation, or was it just something that someone thought was in the books? Because I've encountered this a lot, where someone's like, "Oh, you can't do this because it's in the books," and then when they go and actually look, it's not really
honestly,
in the books.
I don't yet know. I mean, I might go to jail after this.
We might go to jail
yes,
after.
Yeah,
Someone's filming this, right?
But nothing happened. I left my job already, so I guess I'm safe, and I guess it's probably those rules that no one ever read, but that they were instilled through oral tradition.
It's mythology
It's like,
that builds
you
up
shouldn't
over
do that.
time.
You shouldn't do that. You
Right.
shouldn't do that. So then people started saying, you shouldn't do it. And suddenly someone did it, and they were like, what do we do now?
So who in that story, it seems like you have, you had your, we won't call them enemies, but you had your maybe some detractors that were trying to kind of
Yes.
hold the fort, and then you found some people within the organization that, the artists in,
Yes.
in the room. Who were, in organizations, who should we look for when you're trying to push forward on innovation? Where, in your experience, have you found those allies that were maybe a little bit unexpected?
Well, my view is 20% of people adopt change immediately, and they were like longing for it.
Right.
20% of people would never adopt change, no matter what you do, because they live in denial. And 60% of people will depend on how well you do it.
That's exactly the number that we
Yeah,
go by
okay,
as well. It's
good.
trying to make that 60%
And-
move in the
and
right
key-
direction.
And the way I went about around those 60% of the people were basically finding informal change agents that will play a critical role and start changing the language that we were using in the different things. So for example, I was doing an all hands meeting, very informal. I put scooters in just in the building, so people would move in scooters and skateboards from
I'm
place
sure
to
your
place.
risk management officer loved
Yeah, of
that.
course, no, they didn't like it.
Yeah.
But again, it was like, okay, well, one day they will come and say we need to stop it. But so we're doing these kind of things, and I was asking the informal change agents to use them. So people would see, oh, look at that guy. But it's not that the guy with a technical role or the technical job, the manager, or it was more like someone that I just found to be charismatic, and say if you use it, then people would feel comfortable using it. So we bet a lot on those symbols, making change happen through those experiences.
How important do you think, and I think about this a lot, right? So I'm very proud that I was the first innovation director in this area.
Fantastic.
I say, but it's not important that it's me, it's important that there's this signal of innovation in the city of Miami, which is fantastic. Going the next level, okay, so it's not important that it's me, it's important that the city send the signal, but we can't stop there. Can you talk a little bit about that balance between the someone like yourself that is the director of innovation and all innovation starts here, and how important it is to spread that across? Like what's the right balance there? Where should the weight be?
Well, we basically did two things. One is we decided to work on some direct projects that we were conducting, like closing the Buenos Aires Zoo that was there for 140 years in the middle of the city, changing the car racing track, promoting entrepreneurship in a different way. But then, and this was thanks to the mayor that was the governor, it's the governor of the city, that was really, really disruptive and really bought into it, is we basically developed a sort of a workshop that he asked each of the ministers to go through, where we were providing a service to them. So it was like the Minister of Security basically went through the process where we were saying, what are the key issues you have and how can we help you innovate? And we're just like a service provider to them.
Right.
Of course, many
Giving
of them—
people tools so that they
Exactly. Many started very skeptic, and then they said, well, if we could solve this issue of the women that take the bus and how, and we said, what if we put, what if we put one camera, even if it's not technically connected to a hub,
Right.
but just the presence of the camera will prevent people from, from doing something. Oh, we haven't tried it. So those were the kind of things that worked.
We found it similar to what you're talking about in the definition of these problem statements is
Yes.
like a skill set that generally
Yes.
people aren't very good at and government also isn't very good at, to have any level of support and help from innovation departments or departments in general helping craft that, I think has been
Yes.
super helpful. So talking about tools, what tools did you put in place that help you measure whether any of this stuff actually really matters? Again, innovation is this amorphous thing that we don't always know what it means. Some people define it, they make it synonymous with technology, and some people have a different opinion. So how do you know you're doing well?
Great question. The first thing we did this was the first time a Ministry of Innovation was created. Okay, it was Innovation, Modernization, and Technology. That was the technical name. And what we did is a month after we took over, we did a global survey with a third-party company where we asked them 3 questions. One was, how innovative do you think this government is? The second one is, how much more or less innovative do you think it is compared to the national government?
Right.
And thirdly, how more or less do you think it is compared to another province? And we kept track of that every 6 months.
Did you stay within other government agencies, or at some point did you try to compare to the pace of innovation that you might see in the startup world?
No, we just stay there. And
Fair.
we started with a 32% people saying we were innovative. We finished with 54%,
Oh, fantastic.
which was really good. And we were seen as a lot more innovative than the national government, but the gap increased even further. So that was one thing, which is basically asking people, do you think we're innovative? I mean, and then, but the most important thing is we asked them, what do you think was the most innovative thing that this government did? And the answers were totally unrelated to technology. So it was like shutting down the zoo.
Right.
It was like, that is innovative, because the values of a zoo with, caged animals in the middle of a city with 18 bus lines passing through, that's not the type of values I want to teach to my children. So the announcement of starting a process of shutting down the zoo had immediate impact. People saw that as a direct, innovative action. So that was interesting because...
Were you surprised that people were making the connection between... Because again, generally people think innovation is technology.
Exactly. Well, my expectation was the new app that we launched that basically allowed to predict when the next bus was coming to the bus stop. I said people would say that is the most innovative. And people said like,
nope.
no, it's
closing the zoo.
Closing the zoo. And it was like, oh, okay. So that is what they find innovative. So I think that's what people ultimately want to improve their lives, which is like just simple stuff that requires a mindset shift, that requires execution, but also changing the mindset of the people that become part of government.
So we'll close out here with a question sort of about skill set, and you talked about this also being skills that don't just necessarily relate to work, but tie into life. So in the innovation space, particularly in this exponential innovation space, what are the skills that we need to develop in the workforce and in our personal life to be able to stay? What very practical, is it a new type of project management? Is it a certain type of writing? Is it networking? What is it that you would say is sort of the killer skill set that helps you in work and in life?
I normally do a very practical exercise, which is, for example, let's say anyone here is in sales, okay, and you have 5 people in your sales force. Then I do it the factor of multiplying it by 10. I say like, well, let's for a day think that instead of having 5 people in your sales force, you have 50. So you add a 0, okay? How would that look like? And people normally say, like, no, going from 5 to 50 is insane. I can't even think of it. I say, but for a day, just think about that being possible. Let's say instead of having, $50,000 in the bank, you have $500,000. Okay, just add a 0 to every single dimension in your life.
I'm good with that story.
Okay, and then the question is, how would that look like? And it's a mental stretch that I think then allows you to start saying, well, instead of 5, maybe I can have 10. So you double, and doubling sounds like a big stretch if you go from 5 to 10, but doesn't sound like a big stretch if you go from 50 to 10. So once you played in your mind with, so that is a way I used to teach abundance, which is this notion of stretching, no? And then this notion of taking calculated risks, which I was saying before, which is like really saying, okay, I'm going to make a big bet here, but it's one that is set to a boundary that allows me to really know if this makes sense or it doesn't. I was thinking whether to share a story in the entrepreneurial world. Maybe, can I spend 1 minute and do it?
Sure, go for it.
It's not politically correct, okay? I share this in Argentina, and it's like, oh, okay, it's okay, because the value standards are lower.
Oh, no, I'm
No, it was the 2 of us that were going to share it, technically. So in the entrepreneurial world, we wanted to test building Warby Parker in Latin America, which is this this online platform that has stores too, where you can buy reading glasses and sunglasses online. So we said, well, how can we assess whether it has a potential with very little money? So we wanted to assess Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina as potential target markets. We sat down and we said, okay, we can hire a company, we can to do the research, we can open operations, and we said, well, let's do the following. Let's run a survey on Facebook where we look for people to answer 3 questions on how they buy glasses online, okay? And then based on that, they participate in a contest, by participating in the survey, they can win 3 pairs of glasses that we're gonna buy from a store and have available for whoever participates. So we spent $39 in getting 2,000 responses of people saying how they bought glasses online. Once we had that, we launched a fake website, okay? So the guy that was helping me, an assistant called Pablo Simon, so I said, like, well, just put a name, whatever name, just build a website that says your online glasses available, the best line, best prices. And he said, well, what name do we put to the brand? And I said, just put Pablo Simon. I said, well, Pablo Simon doesn't sound like a brand of, so put Paul Simon, okay? So we launched a website which was Paul Simon, the best sunglasses in the world. And we had fake pictures. People would click, fill in a cart, and then when they were putting all the credit card information and they were confirming the order, it was saying, oops, something happened. We're not going to process your order. Don't worry. We're not going to use the credit card information. That was okay. Now, that allowed us to do a real testing of a real website because people were clicking. And by the time they were clicking, they were thinking that was real, okay? So we could tell exactly what was the potential conversion rate, how many people would buy. And we did that with an extra $50 in 3 markets, okay? So the bottom line is we spent $89 to test a product in 3 markets. Now, I use it as an example of calculated risks. It was $89. Now, one could blame me, well, it was a fake website. I mean, they shouldn't have done it. But the reality is, I mean, people just didn't get the product and they didn't spend the money. But it allows...
Paul Simon is getting death threats.
Paul Simon is, yes, went to jail, but that's okay. I mean, it was part of his... No, I'm kidding. But I just illustrate as an example. Many times the possibility of testing something is a lot closer than you think. And it requires some creativity to see how can we explore testing our own boundaries here in a way in which we can take a safe bet and see how it goes. So
I love the idea of ending on user testing and the idea of stretching. I think everyone's going to be able to stretch their minds at this conference and over time, and I think it's a critical part of innovation. And we probably have a few minutes to stretch now before the next talk.